Okay, today we are looking at the PowerColor Radeon R7 260X Turbo Duo overclocked graphics card, and we're going to be comparing that with the Radeon R9 270. This is the top of the R7 lineup versus the bottom of the R9. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly unbox the 260X first. As it is the top of the R7 lineup, you'll see it comes in a nice box. It's got that nice Turbo Duo thing on the top of it. The graphics card itself. Inside the box we've got your pretty standard VGA to DVI connector, you've got the user manual thing, and the driver's CD that you'll never use. And now we'll quickly unbox the R9 270, if I can get this box undone. Here we go. Because this is the lower model, it does have just a plain box, there's no fancy things about it. You just have the graphics card here in an anti-static bag. Here we go. And it's got pretty much exactly the same as the 260X, the VGA to DVI connector, the manual, and the driver's CD. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the 260X. It has 2 GB of GDDR5 memory, clocked at 1650 MHz, that's 6600 MHz effective. It has a memory bit bus of 128, which is quite narrow. It has 896 stream processors, and the GPU core clock is at 1160 MHz. That is because this is a pre-overclocked card. It is also capable of a single crossfire with another identical card. It features a DVI-I port, a DVI-D port, an HDMI port, and a standard display port. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the R9 270 now. It has 2 GB of GDDR5 memory, but it's clocked slightly slower at 1400 MHz or 5600 MHz effectively. It does have a bigger memory bit bus though of 256. Its core clock is 930 MHz, and that boosts up to 955 MHz. That is because this is a non-overclocked card. It can be, I should add, overclocked up to the amount of a normal 270X card. It features 1 DVI port, 1 HDMI port, and 1 single display port, which is 1 less DVI port than the 260X. Worth noting that both these graphics cards only use a 1 6-pin PCIe Express power connector. Okay, so here's a reminder of the specs we just went over. Hi guys, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these two graphics cards before we actually get into the details. I'd like to mention the price points of these. These are the graphics cards that I think are kind of the minimum-ish of the new lineup anyway. I mean, at the moment you can get deals on the older ones, the 7850, the 7870 from AMD particularly are very good value at the moment, but they're kind of old technology, so out of the new lineup, these are the two that I've chosen so far, and these are the R7 260X and the R9 270. So what this is the top end of the R7 lineup and the bottom end of the R9. So we're going to look at them and we're going to compare them and see how they go. So yes, on to price. The R7 260X, this one itself here, this one right here, yes, is around the £110 mark. I mean, they fluctuate all around. I mean, I've seen an MSI 260X for around the £100 mark, so yeah, they're quite cheap like that, and yeah, they're quite good. So, but then this one, the lowest of the R9 lineup, this is around the £130 mark, so there's roughly a £20 difference in them. So I mean, if you can't afford any more than £110 on a graphics card, then you know this isn't such a bad choice, you know. But if you can get an extra 20, if you can borrow it off someone, then you could go for this. But yeah, so we're going to look at how these perform. Okay, so before we actually go into the benchmarks, I'd like to talk a little bit about the differences between these two cards, because they are quite similar on price. Like I say, it's £20. And the difference is this, the R7 260X, only has 896 stream processors, and that's kind of like the main cores in it, the things that it does everything with, whereas this one here has 1280, and that's a significant amount more, as we shall see in a while. Also, this one has an 128-bit bus, which is like how much memory can fit through at once. It can use at once. It can have as much as it likes. But if it's got a narrow bus, then it's going to be bottlenecking it. And 128 is actually quite narrow, to be honest. I mean, if you think the 280X has 384, and the R9 290X has a 512-bit bus, so yeah. But they're made for like multi-monitors and things like that. Although some games can take advantage of a bigger memory bus, but yeah, with only 128, you will start, especially in the newer games, to see like bottlenecking where your memory's struggling to actually get all itself done completely like that. Whereas this one has a more respectable 256, so that would be better for the future. But yeah, like I say, they're not too bad. As this is an overclocked edition, its GPU core clock is 1160 megahertz, which is pretty fast. That's a pretty good overclock on it. Anyway, you could probably only overclock it a little bit extra than that. Okay, this card, which isn't overclocked, only has a 930 megahertz core clock, and it boosts up to about 955. Though I should mention, these are kind of the R7 non-X's are kind of locked to stop you overclocking them so much. So people don't just buy these and then not bother with the X. Yeah, because I found like this, but you can take it up to an R7 270X, just you can't overclock it any further than that. Or at least that's been my experience with this card. Obviously, I don't know if the other manufacturers' ones are going to be exactly the same as that. Other things worth mentioning, this, as it is the higher model, this comes with the two DVI, the DVI-D and DVI-I, and the DisplayPort and the HDMI. And this one, as the base model, so to speak, only has one on it, so there we go. It depends what you're planning to do with them to whether that makes it. But with one of these cards, I wouldn't be running like 3 monitors or anything like that. I mean, I run 2 with them. Obviously, I always run 2 monitors, but that's not. Especially if you're thinking of infinitying them, then yeah, no, don't try that. No. The final thing I'd like to say about this before we look at the benchmarks is they're not too high on the power draw, because I often find in the comments I get people asking me, I've got a this much wattage power supply, is it going to work with this card? Well, I have to be quite careful because I don't want to recommend something that's going to blow someone's machine up, but these actually, the manufacturer recommend a 500 watt power supply. Now, these actually will only draw probably around 120 watts or something like that, so if you had a 450 watts power supply, both of these would be absolutely fine with that. Any less than 400, then I'd think, no, maybe don't want to be doing that, because power supplies under that tend to be for systems that with discrete graphics cards or something like that. Okay, so let's look at the benchmarks and see how these do. So there we go. As you see, the R7 260X on ultra settings it's playable on some settings. You know, I wouldn't say everything. I mean, Crysis 3 especially is very heavy on the graphics, and I think a lot of that's going to be struggling with its small data bus for the memory, and it's kind of borderline there. So yeah, if you turn down some of the settings, then this would be like more than playable. I know I count kind of 30 frames per second as the playable mark, so yeah, but turn it a little bit down and this will be fine. However, if you do want something that's going to play on ultra on every single game at the moment, above 30 frames per second at least, then you would have to have one of these babies. £130 at the moment, and for what you get, bearing in mind this in performance is pretty similar to a GTX 760. So, and what's the price discount on that? Let me look at that. About £60 less. So it really is worth thinking about. obviously Nvidia have some other things going for them, like G-Sync, and they do tend to just price their GPUs more expensive, just because they can, because they have a bit of a monopoly, especially on the higher end. So, although AMD are kind of coming back. So on ultra settings, the R9 270 pretty much stayed above the 30 frames per second mark. I think it was only, yeah, it was only Crysis 3 and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Now, I should mention, when I did these benchmarks, Assassin's Creed Black Flag had kind of only just recently come out, and it will have been more optimised for the drivers, and it's also an Nvidia game, so to speak. Okay, the overall build quality of these cards, I did want to talk about that just quickly. Now, as I said, this is, because again, this is the top model of the R7 lineup. It feels pretty nice. I mean, I'm usually not a fan of plastic shrouds, so this is quite solid, and this is kind of solid, nice solid rubber here. The PCB at the black is back. Yeah, and you've got these little vent holes here. They look quite nice. I quite like that. When it's in the system and you're trying to take it out, especially out of my system, which is horrible. You do get a little bit of the old flex going on like this, but you know, it's not bad, and I think it does look quite nice. So there we go. Now this one, I thought this is kind of, it's plastic made to look like metal, and you kind of feel it, and you're like, is that metal or is that plastic? Is that so? Yeah, they've done a really good job on that, and obviously this has it's got one single bigger fan rather than two little ones here. Yeah, I never had a problem with the heating. This again has the black PCB, which I know we enthusiasts like. Oh yeah. So yeah. Okay, so you've seen what they can both do. My recommendation would be whichever one you can afford, basically. If you've got £130 to spend on a GPU, then I could not recommend the R9 270 any higher. You can play any modern game that's out at the moment on ultra settings at 1080p. I think it's worth noting at 1080p, because I have a 1440p monitor and I just tested it on a different one, so don't worry, I didn't mess it up like that, as I have done in the past with the... I once tested a 760 and I was like, this is coming out really low. Yeah, because I had it set to 1440p. That was a long time ago though. No, we've moved on since then. Okay. So I didn't do any kind of productivity tests on this, because I don't think that's too relevant. I just wanted to test the gaming performance, because especially with Steam machines coming out this year, then a lot of people are going to be looking for like cost-effective, small, compact graphics cards. Although these aren't that small, but with a riser on them, so you can put them in like that. This will be alright. It's quite compact. If you bear in mind that my 280X is like this much, this long on it. So yeah. Either of these would be good for a Steam machine. If you're thinking of building a Steam machine, indeed, that would be great. But yeah, I think the 270 and the 270X I already know is being used in Steam machines. But if you're going to build your own, then I would say you're much better off taking an R9 270, because in such a small, compact form factor, where cooling is going to be an issue, it's not going to be great airflow. You're not going to be able to get a super overclock on that, and this is basically exactly the same, just without an overclock on it. So, but you've seen the results, you've seen what it can do. I can say no more on it. Okay guys, thank you very much for watching this. Let me know in the comments below, which of these would you choose? If you were building a Steam machine, what GPU would you be tempted to go for? Would you go for an AMD card such as this, or would you be tempted to go for like a mini GTX 760? I know that MSI have got a new mini one out. It's quite interesting. I've had like 3 760s, so I'm not getting another one in. So we'll be waiting a little bit on that one. Lastly of all, we now have a Facebook page. So if you want to like that, you can get it on the link that's right here or here, wherever I'm going to put it later on. I just like to add a little bit more about that. It's like, oh, it's a Facebook page, oh, who cares? How it works is, when we're trying later on, once we've got more viewers and more likes and shares and what have you, yeah, sponsors, what they want to do is like, how many people do you have on Facebook? Because that's how they kind of harvest all your data and that. But for me to be able to get good sponsorships and get more things in that are much better than this to review, we need more people on Facebook, and that means we need you guys to like us. So yes, if you could do that, it would be absolutely much appreciated. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.